In his role as a Microsoft Technologies evangelist and consultant, our keynote speaker has designed, implemented, and supported the SharePoint environment for the broadcast of every Olympic game since 2006. Having worked with Microsoft Technologies at the Olympics in Torino, Beijing, Vancouver, and London, and here today to share some of his experiences, please welcome our SharePoint Leadership Forum keynote speaker, SharePoint MVP Dan Holme.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
How about that?
All right. All right. Welcome. I hope you guys are enjoying your morning so far. I hope it's providing a lot of value. I'd like to say thank you so much to Bamboo Solutions. Tack så mycket, Anders. Thank you to Rob and Mark and Tim and Sadie and Barry for great presentations. As the introduction suggested, my goal today is to share with you some of what I've done over the course of the summer at the London Olympic Games. So let's dive right in, and I'll tell you a little bit first about myself. My name is Dan Holme. Actually, I guess I can use the clicker that I've got in my hand. My name is Dan Holme. I'm SharePoint MVP for 6 years and was a Directory Services MVP before that, Active Directory. I've been working in technology for in the Microsoft stack for about 18 years now, which is kind of scary to say. This is where I live. I actually live in Maui, Hawaii. Thought I'd share a few slides of what it looks like the few days of the year that I'm at home. This is the beach I hang out at, and this is actually the view from my home office where I spend time working. And this is literally a bamboo rainforest, so this is my own bamboo solution. If anyone wants some extra bamboo, just come with a saw. While I'm there, I write books and articles and support customers remotely. I've got my own consulting business called Intellium, and we are a boutique consulting firm that services primarily Fortune caliber organizations across corporate, academic, and very important in this town, government organizations. So I've spent the last 18 years helping almost every Fortune 100 organization and about 80% of the Fortune 500s in their Microsoft technology implementations. And the one that I'm able to talk about publicly, which is a wonderful thing and was why we're here today, is NBC, which, as was suggested, I've spent the last 6 years now supporting the Olympic Games, starting with Torino, which was, in fact, where I fell in love with SharePoint. We were in the middle of the broadcast, which is, as you might know, a $1 billion proposition from a revenue perspective for NBC. And we started having significant issues with our transmissions. And our engineering group had to find a way to pull together their team, which was spread across not only the entire city of Torino, but across the Piedmont region in all the venues, to troubleshoot issues. And we needed to create an application to manage this issue troubleshooting, and we had exactly overnight to do that. Now, had this been 2 years earlier, it would have been impossible. We would have had to look at how long it would take to develop a custom application or even an Access database to do this, how to provide it in a format that could be accessed even from outside our corporate network. And luckily, by 2006, Windows SharePoint Services version 2 was able to come to the rescue. And that's literally where I learned about SharePoint. I had heard about SharePoint. I knew it had the potential to help rapidly develop solutions. And so we threw it up overnight, and by the morning had our issues tracking application running for our engineering group. And that's where I learned that, and where I came to believe that SharePoint really has the opportunity to deliver really significant business value, particularly if you look for the big wins, and if you look and try to keep it as simple as you possibly can. And as Sadie's model suggests, there's a lot of value you can get before you even start having to plug in third-party tools and utilities. But one of the great things about SharePoint is that when you're ready to go past that threshold, there are amazing options out there. There are vendors like Bamboo and like Caligo, and there are community members like Sadie who provide this incredible information out there. And that's one of the most valuable things to my customers about SharePoint, is just the access to a rich ecosystem and community that they get with SharePoint. So Torino is where I fell in love with SharePoint. Beijing, we put SharePoint 2007 server in place, and it supported significantly more business process and collaboration for us. That's where we dove into SharePoint as a collaboration platform with this particular customer. SharePoint moved forward in 2010 to support us in the Vancouver Olympics. We were still using SharePoint 2007 because it was not yet publicly released during the Olympic Games. However, we did use beta of 2010 online to support one specific business workload we had in those games. And then London, this last summer, we, of course, were able to use SharePoint Server 2010. And in Sochi and Rio, we will be looking at using SharePoint 2013. So this is what I did this summer.
The Olympic Games are approaching the finish line. But there are still performances to complete, barriers to break through. In London, he's outraced every individual rival. Tonight, joined with his team, a chance to complete an unprecedented double-triple. Individually, they claim gold medals long awaited. Now together, they target another world record for the U.S. Last weekend, he capped an unforgettable British night. Tonight, the home crowd is eager for another celebration at the track, as well as the pool, where a young countryman has a passionate following. And they look for a first-ever Olympic win against the very opponent that blocked their path to gold last time. Unfinished business on the agenda tonight in London at the Games of the 30th Olympiad.
So not a bad way to spend the summer. The Summer Olympics, as you know, is a gigantic undertaking. The 30th Olympics in London involved more than 10,000 athletes, 70,000 volunteers, 10,000 press, so there were as many press as there were athletes, 302 medal competitions over 19 days. The statistics are absolutely mind-boggling. And the Olympic Games are organized in each venue, in each location, by the organizing committee. So there was a London organizing committee, there is now a Sochi and Rio organizing committee. And the Olympics itself is supported by Atos. So Atos is the official IT provider for the Olympics. My role is with NBC, which is also a mammoth undertaking. And to give you an idea of what we're dealing with at the Olympics and what we're having to support, let me run through a couple of quick statistics for you. During the Olympic Games, we provided more than 5,500 hours of content, which averages out to 300 hours a day of content. Some context, the Sydney Olympics in 2000, 300 hours of content for the entire Games. So we were now pushing as much content every day as we pushed during the entire Sydney Olympic Games. We did that over all of our networks, the NBC Broadcast Network, all of the cable networks that are now part of the NBC Sports family, as well as NBCOlympics.com, our website. Our website had over 3,500 hours of unique content available. We streamed every single competition live. So you could, if you were a sports fan, tune into any competition. And in some venues, you could actually pick the camera angle that you were watching. So in gymnastics, you could choose to watch just the vault or just the bars. And to broadcast the games, the NBC paid $1.1 billion US. This was part of a contract that predated. Wow. I'm not sure what that was, but we will unplug the audio because we don't need it anymore. $1.1 billion just for the rights to broadcast the games to the U.S. audience. So there are other broadcast rights holders for other countries and other regions, and that's the fees we pay to the Olympic Committee in order to have the ability to bring the games to you. That doesn't include the actual cost of actually producing and broadcasting those games. But in return, it was a ridiculously successful Games. We were blown away, astounded, and thrilled with the response we got. It was the most watched television event in history. We had over 219 million unique viewers during the course of the Olympics. Now, if you figure the U.S. has a population of 320 million people, and you take away the infants and a few people here and there, that's pretty much every single adult in the United States watched on television at least once during the Games. The average primetime viewers, 31 million, is an astounding number. That's more than all but the first presidential debate, to give you some context. And there's a halo effect that reaches across all of the other NBC properties. So everything from the Today Show to the Nightly News to Saturday Night Live to the affiliates and their local newscasts and local programming all benefit from this. And what is really astounding with this Games is this is where digital media really took hold. We did a lot of digital stuff in Beijing, but this is where it just caught fire. Over 9.9 million devices were used to stream video from the Olympic Games. We had over 159 million, wait, let me see if I can remember what this was. 159 million streams, totaling over 20 million hours. And 60% or so of that was on desktop sorts of devices. About 40% was on mobile devices. 2 billion unique page views on NBCOlympics.com. 80 million unique users. So again, 1 out of every 4 US adults accessed our digital property. And social networking numbers were astounding. It was by far the most talked about event across Facebook and Twitter and everything else. And one of the interesting statistics that's not on this slide, which is good for us all to think about, is of the people who were watching the Olympics on their mobile devices, were streaming video on their mobile devices, 80% of them had never streamed video to a mobile device before. Now, of course, they may have used YouTube or whatever on their desktop, but they had never streamed video on a mobile device. This Olympic Games changed the culture of mobile media in the United States. And that means there's going to be people starting to expect that, not only in the consumer world, but in your organizations as well. People will be more receptive and perhaps even more demanding of the ability to access video content on mobile devices. So Barry and his company will have lots of interesting things to do there with mobile devices and media as well. So very, very astounding numbers, just huge, huge numbers that we were dealing with. My job in London was to be the Microsoft Technologies consultant. So I was responsible for the Microsoft stack, primarily Windows Server and Client, Active Directory, group policy, scripting for management, and SharePoint, of course, which is why we're here today. So that was my job. As I go into some of the specifics of what we did and share with you some of the wins we found with SharePoint this year, one of the things I like to preface this discussion with is a little bit of a caveat. This is the Olympics, but it is just an enterprise needing to get a job done. Our job is high profile, it's fun, it's visible, and it's really cool to talk about for sure. But in the end, you're going to see a lot of these things. Actually, every single thing I talk about is something you probably need in your organization. It's not rocket science. We didn't do anything that I would consider to be just astoundingly innovative. We just put the parts together in ways that delivered business solutions. Looking at Sadie's model, I would say we were pretty squarely in the 200, 300 range of maturity for collaboration. But that's in an organization that is exactly 7 weeks old when the Olympics start, as opposed to being 8 or 10 years old. So it is just the Olympics. And as a consultant, I always like to start this discussion by focusing on the business requirements. You want to do things because there's a business reason. You want to understand what the outcomes are that you desire from a business perspective, what your constraints are from a time and money perspective and resources, and the political realities which sometimes come into play. I think it was Barry who was talking about board members. You know, there's times when certain people want things and you do give them because of who they are, or you can't get them because of who they are. So let's take a quick look at some of the requirements so you understand what we were trying to address here. First, the work environment. NBC, as an organization, had over 3,700 people working on the games. There's a huge team bringing the broadcast to you. So that's almost 1 for every 2 athletes in the games. 3,700 people, about 2,700 were in London, flown in to work on the games, and about 1,000 were working at 30 Rock and around New York and Connecticut on the games. So very, very big team. The vast majority of them were at what's called the International Broadcast Center, which is in London. It was part of the Olympic Park, and it is basically like a giant convention center that's empty. And about 3 months before the games, maybe a little bit more, they start building the walls. About 3 weeks before the games, there are maybe 100, maybe a couple hundred employees for NBC there. So it's basically doesn't exist. By about 2 weeks before the games and down to 1 week before the games, you now have 2,700 people working on a $1 billion project. And literally, before closing ceremony is even finished, walls are getting torn down and the organization is gone. It is the shortest life cycle of a large enterprise that you could possibly imagine, from 0 to 4,000 to 0 in a course of really a couple of months. It's a staggering thing, and that's one of the real realities that we have to deal with. So we have some very unique challenges. It's a very short lifespan of a large enterprise. The July 4th to August 12th is the time that I was there, and that is the time we go from a couple hundred to 4,000 and back down. We have a best-of-class team. In order to pull off the Olympics, everyone who's part of that team is the best at what they do. They're amazing people, and they've got very high expectations put on their shoulders, And so they have very high expectations of everyone else they're working with. This is a very high pressure situation. It's not a vacation by any stretch. Very high demands and one-of-a-kind technologies. What we're using to put the games together from the camera to you in your living room or on your device or on your computer is new every single games. What we did in London was completely different than what we did in Beijing, which was different from Vancouver, from Beijing. There are very few standards that we can rely on. And everything is put together approximately 24 hours before opening ceremonies. We wish it would be 48, but this time it was actually a little bit less than 24 hours. Some of us refer to the Olympics as a $1 billion lab. Because that's basically what it is. We can't build this stuff in advance. We can't test this stuff in advance. We just have to understand it well enough and hope the pieces fit together and have a really good team to work hard to make that happen. There's $1 billion on the line, and it's all on live TV. So anything that goes wrong, you see in your living room. In Torino, we had a blue screen of death in our fireplace because the fireplace is actually an LCD screen showing a video loop of a fire, and in Torino, Semantic Antivirus kicked in and caused a blue screen right in the studio fireplace, which was lovely. So very, very unique challenges, unique environment, and so from a requirements perspective of what we have to build, everything has to be done quickly. It has to be extremely easy for end users because we've got 3,700 people coming together. Very few of them have actually used SharePoint before. Interestingly, NBC is a very late adopter of SharePoint. They're heading there, but it's slow. Part of that's because they've been in GE and now they're in Comcast and all the political realities there. But we needed to provide a solution that was discoverable and usable without end user training. We could not drive adoption. There wasn't time. All we could do was provide a tool that allowed people to do what they needed to get done. That alone was enough driver for them to use it, and then we needed to make sure it was easy. We had to support bring your own device. This was a huge change, even over Vancouver, which was 18 months before London. We, in Vancouver, could get by with saying, if you're not on a corporate supported device, we're not going to support you. You have to figure out how to use it yourself. That was no longer an option for us. We had way too many users who had business critical things that they were doing on their iPads, on their Macs, and other devices, and they had to be supported. And very limited resources. We have a very small team. The IT team supporting 4,000 users was really about 8 people, plus a help desk of about 10 who could just answer the phone. And I was the one and only SharePoint guy supporting an enterprise of 4,000 users. So if you're curious about how much staff you need to support SharePoint, if you do it right, but that's the trick, is putting the pieces together in a way that is manageable. Whoops, sorry. It had to be very easy to support because, again, we had a limited team. We needed to be able to support things quickly and very, very flexible. We needed to be able to respond to business needs so that if something came up, particularly during broadcast, we would be able to respond quickly. And it needed to be able to scale from a few hundred users on day 1 to 4,000 users. So those were the kind of requirements that we were after. These sets of requirements drove us to create very unique solutions, some of which were planned. Some of the things we do, we actually know we're going to need to do because we've done this before and we know kind of challenges we're going to face. But we also have to be ready to deliver quick and dirty solutions where someone comes and says, we need this, we need it now, get it done and get it done in a matter of hours. Luckily, SharePoint is very good with that. And I am a huge believer in the 80-20 rule. The idea that you can get 80% of what people need done with 20% of the effort and everything after that is painful. And I'm a big proponent of that with all of my customers. It's what my experience has proven to be true, especially with SharePoint. And so we really tried to hit that mark of giving people what they really truly needed, not necessarily what they wanted or preferred. And that helped us a lot. So some specifics. Everything started with our intranet. And our intranet was ollie2012.nbcuni.ge.com. And that was our homepage. You're actually seeing it here. It was its own web app. We set it up so that as long as you were on the network, you could see it. So we had anonymous viewing enabled. And we also allowed inline PDF viewing. And here's an example of a political reality. So PDFs are a fact of life. We all work with them. Our users need to read them. And as you know, with SharePoint 2010, you can no longer open a PDF in the browser. And that's because PDF really stands for a pretty dangerous file. There's a lot of serious security vulnerabilities in the PDF format because it can support JavaScript, which then runs under the user's credentials and can do anything the user could do, including delete or leak data. So Microsoft shuts down inline PDF viewing for security for a conservative security stance. Users want to open up PDFs and have them open up in their browser, not have to save them to their desktop. And so this is something we had to deal with. We had to actually go to the CIO and lay out the facts and say, here's why you can't do PDF inline viewing by default. Here's what users want. And we had to have the business make a decision about which way to go. And they chose to enable inline PDF viewing because usability was paramount. And we had enough faith in our antivirus solutions and in our users who were creating these PDFs and in our applications that were creating these PDFs that we could decide to take that risk and open ourselves up to that. We set up an alternate access mapping so that users could just type HTTP Ali 2012 and they could then get to that page. And we also set it as the default page so that when users fired up their Internet Explorer, it got there. Now from that homepage, which is shown here, you'll notice it's very clean, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit. We wanted to make sure that everything was discoverable and navigable within that. So as long as you got to Ali 2012, you would be able to find what you needed to get your job done. And so we wanted to use SharePoint as the glue that stuck together all of the disparate tools and functions and tasks and processes that people needed to work with. There's a couple of ways you can do that kind of thing with SharePoint. One is to build or buy a solution that actually sits in SharePoint. So you build a web part, you get something from Bamboo or from a third-party vendor, and you plug it into SharePoint. That's one way. But there's other ways to do it, including page viewer web parts and links. So for example, this is our phone directory. It looks to you like it's in SharePoint, and in fact, users get to it through SharePoint. But this is actually simply a page viewer web part to a .NET phone book application that was developed 6 years ago that hasn't needed to be changed. All we did was strip off some navigation from the tops and side that would normally be there and plugged it into SharePoint with a page viewer web part. It took 30 seconds to do. And one thing that drives people to an intranet is needing to find other people. And so putting the phone book in SharePoint meant that everyone at some point early on would actually go in there. They would make sure their phone was listed correctly. It got them into SharePoint, which was nice. One of our calendars. This is a calendar that was actually being generated by an application. It's straight HTML. We were publishing it straight to IIS and then putting it in a page viewer web part because we wanted specific types of information and formatting, and the developer felt more comfortable doing it that way. This is another application. This is our laptop checkout, where when a user came to get their laptop for the games, we could barcode scan it, attach it to their employee ID, and let them walk away. This is, again, a .NET application simply placed with a page viewer web part inside of SharePoint. So we did a lot of very simple things to plug the various tools we needed into SharePoint. We then made sure that people could get to the things they needed to easily. The home page of the intranet, my goal with that was to keep it exceptionally clean. I didn't want the homepage of the internet to be everyone's political place to say, I have a voice that should be heard. I didn't want it to be a news broadcast. I wanted it to be a place for users to then move to what they really cared about. And so we had very little news. In fact, the day I took this screenshot, there wasn't any. We did put our daily journal that basically said what was going on with the games that day, because that was super important for everyone. But everything else was just top navigation and left navigation, keeping it really, really super clean. Another thing we did to integrate applications with SharePoint is use WebDAV. Now, WebDAV is what you use when you connect a document library with Explorer and you can drag and drop. It's using WebDAV to do that. Applications can use WebDAV. So we had a number of applications that generate documents. We have these incredible research applications and venue management applications, and they literally create PDFs. And then the developer just simply added a very small chunk of code to publish those up into SharePoint into a document library where users access them. So rather than getting to them from the application themselves, they would get to it through WebDAV. And that worked quite well as well. So sorry, this was a little bit out of order. So navigation was clean and simple. And then once we got into the specific parts of our intranet, we tried to, again, keep it simple and focused on what users really needed. So we did what I would call an extreme makeover on team sites, and I'll give you some examples of what we did here. First of all, we kept it really, really simple. I'm sorry this is going off screen here, but this was the blank team site template with nothing in it except for the name of this particular team. And over here, where you would normally have document libraries and lists and discussion boards, we changed terminology, because I'm a believer that you should use terminology that is user-centric, not technology-centric. And I think document library and list doesn't mean anything to a normal user. They think about, content or apps. Users these days understand the idea of apps. And so we had content, which was sort of our new name for a document library. It was a place you could find content. And then anything else was an app. And we had calendars and tasks as defaults. And then if users needed something else, they would go and get an app. They would request an app. So we used that terminology, and it was no coincidence that users asked for those things. And at the same time, Microsoft was hearing customers use the same terminology. And in SharePoint 2013, as you probably have heard, everything's an app. So we were heading in the same direction there with that. Now, as we fleshed out team sites, we added the key functionality to the team sites homepage. On the IT page, for example, we added the support ticket system, which was necessary, and we added links to all other content and apps that a team would need to the left navigation. Our goal was to ensure that no user would ever have to go to that all-site content link at the bottom. Everything that normal users needed would be instantly navigable, and only if you were an administrator or a manager of some of the back-end lists, things that drive drop-down lists and things like that, then you would go to all-site content, and you would obviously be trained for that. But normal users could just land on this page and find what they needed for their team. We also embedded mailboxes. So team mailboxes were presented, page viewer web part, within the team site. Of course, in SharePoint 2013, team mailboxes are now a built-in feature that's provided by the integration of SharePoint and Exchange. And very importantly, as I mentioned, we could not provide training for users. We built in training to every place users would land. So this is an example of a team site that had very specific, we knew what this team was going to need, and it was going to be to manage security and to manage a specific list. And so on the home page, we gave them basically a link that says, what do you want to do? You want to manage security, and here's how you manage security for the 3 main groups. And these were just links to the group management pages. Do you need to modify the list? Here's how you do it. And so we provided the instructions inline. We did the same thing where it was necessary to help users understand, for example, how to log on. This was a generic logon page. And in our document library, instead of expecting users to find the right ribbon and the right command, we simply told them exactly what to do in the document library with a content editor web part at the top. So we did not expect users to hunt and peck and find things. We simply told them, and we know that 80% of the time, all users want to do is add one document or add multiple documents, open one document, or download multiple documents. That's pretty much what users do in document libraries. Everything else that's on the ribbon is something that we could train users to on a one-off basis. So we embedded lots and lots of instructions. In forms, you can see we embedded instructions in light gray. Let me check our time. Where are we on time, by the way, or how late? Because I didn't look at when we started. 5, 10 minutes? OK, cool. Within the team sites, we had some what I would call very standard collaboration, things that we all do, all my customers do with SharePoint. We had team sites. So the example here, again, a nice clean document library right where that team needed it. Document libraries, very standard collaboration. Calendars, built-in types of lists, and then custom lists. So we did very, very standard stuff within our team sites, nothing particularly rocket science there. And then from a business automation perspective, this is one of the places we moved forward versus our last games in Vancouver. We really started to look at paper-based, manual, and email-based processes and said, how can we move those into SharePoint and automate those processes? And we were very basic. We were using sort of the quick, easy wins of SharePoint, which is, which is having a SharePoint list that has your data. Instead of using the built-in SharePoint form, we opened up InfoPath to customize the built-in forms. Now, this is not the same as an InfoPath form library. This is just using InfoPath to make the existing forms look pretty, kind of like, pull it back here, like this. So instead of looking like a standard SharePoint list form, you just use InfoPath and you make it look prettier. You add the right formatting. You add instructions and that kind of thing. So we did a lot of that InfoPath list form customization. We added workflows with SharePoint Designer. And we made sure that we had all the right views for users so that they could get to the data the way they would need to. So this is an example of a business process automation that was new for us in Vancouver. We have what I would call gophers. We call them runners, who will do anything. That's what they're there for, whether it's going out and purchasing a hard drive from the computer store 3 miles away or doing something for any other team. And we set up a request where any user could go in and request a runner to do something. They could fill it in. The runner managers would then get an email saying this request is there, please assign a runner. The runner manager could actually then go in and assign the correct runner, and that would then send a notification back to the original user saying this is who's going to do your job. So very simple business process automation, all out-of-box SharePoint and Office client stuff. That was very, very useful. It was a big win. These people thought this was amazing because it used to be they had to walk half a mile down the IBC to fill out a paper form and then wait for a phone call telling them what was going to happen. Now, we also use SharePoint to support our own operations. We, as a lean IT staff, wanted to ensure that we were able to provide valuable service to our users and to make our jobs easier as the IT staff. So we created a self-service help desk to cover what we thought would be the most important critical things for our users so that when they arrived, they could get to work immediately. And when users arrived at the IBC, what they would need is to be able to get to the internet, to print documents, and to be able to install custom applications that we have to support the actual broadcast. So we had a help desk site. The help desk site was smack dab center of the global navigation. It gave quick links to the things we needed users to be able to do. If they went to the help desk site itself, it had the phone numbers and email addresses and pictures of all the staff. And then we had application installation. Here's the application. Here are the instructions to go through, a link to the installer package. And so users who were arriving, and they knew what they needed. Your business users know what they need most of the time. It's just a matter of how much process and obstacle is between the user and what they're actually trying to get done, and we're trying to remove that obstacle. From a printer perspective, they could come to a page and just double-click a printer. And this is not a rocket science solution. This is a page viewer web part pointing to / server name of the printer server. Everything else Windows does for you automatically. There's no magic here. It's just a matter of giving it to users in a place they can find it. An FAQ. How do I connect to the internet? Here's how. Here's your proxy address. Couldn't be any easier. So that actually helped a lot because it meant users really didn't have to contact the help desk the first day or two they were on the job. They could get what they needed and move on. Then from an IT perspective, we started automating our own processes. We had an issue tracking database that would allow us to do help desk recording. And we did that because NBC Universal has its own commercial help desk application. But we were dealing with a help desk staff that was temporary hires, and so we didn't want to give them access to the full-fledged help desk application. So we just needed something that lasted the duration of the games. We use SharePoint. We've done it for 3 games now, and it works really, really well. So we had a help desk application that we built based on the issue tracking template in SharePoint. We kept track of inventory in SharePoint. This is an example of some of our prompter systems, and we kept track of all the key information about them. Configuration about our environment. We kept track of our DHCP leases, what actual physical facilities those were associated with. And we also did an interesting little thing where one of our business needs is to track rogue devices that are on the network, on the actual production wired network and shouldn't be. And so the way we did that was we took our DHCP leases from our DHCP server, dumped those into an HTML file, and presented them, or sorry, this is it over on the left, and presented it so that we could keep track of devices that we didn't recognize, find out based on the DHCP scopes which site they were in, and go track them down. So we just listened to our own business needs and found a way to expose that information within SharePoint. Use SharePoint as the glue. We use SharePoint to manage group requests. If a user needed access to a resource, needed to be added to a group, there was a list in SharePoint where a user could go say, add Dan to this group. Then we had a PowerShell script that ran every 15 minutes that read that list and added the user to the group. We did the same thing with password resets. If a user needed a password reset, a help desk person could just put a request in a SharePoint list. A PowerShell script ran with elevated credentials, changed the password. So that meant our help desk didn't actually need to be delegated that permission, which was a security concern for us, but they were still able to perform the job. And this is an example of what I call provisioning, which is using SharePoint to drive other operations in your organization. And all it basically requires is that you have a SharePoint list that keeps track of whatever data you're collecting, the request. You have a workflow that turns that request into an approved request, perhaps. And then you have a scheduled task that runs a PowerShell script with elevated credentials that can actually do the job. So that means whoever you allow access to the list can make the request. without actually having permission to do the job on the back end. And it's a really simple framework. I've used it in lots of very big clients for all kinds of jobs, and it works. So we did it for password reset, group membership, moving users and computers between OUs, changing properties like logon scripts and profile paths and those kinds of things, and copying data from one part of our environment to another. The other thing we used this framework for was requesting SharePoint sites itself. Sadie talked about how do you have a process that allows users to request a new site? Yes, we had a SharePoint list where anyone could go and say, I need a site, here's the name, here's what it's for, here's the type of information that's in it, and within 5 minutes, a scheduled task would run that would deploy that site with all of our customizations, with the trimmed user interface, with all of the navigation that we wanted, with the terminology, the embedded help, and everything that we needed. So we did a lot with SharePoint. Everything that led up to the talent on camera reading something, which at that point starts with a television prompter, television cameras, and dedicated video systems. Everything up to that point was very heavily supported by SharePoint. It worked extremely well for us. Again, we were really focused on the collaboration. Collaboration was definitely a key for our success. And as we look forward to Sochi, which is, I will be in Sochi 14 months from now. It's very soon. And Rio about 18 or 20 months after that. I'm really looking forward to SharePoint 2013. SharePoint 2013 takes SharePoint 2010 and makes it usable. The things that I had to myself solve, terminology, usability, those things Microsoft invested heavily in for SharePoint 2013. This is really a user release of SharePoint. There's not much on the infrastructure that's been changed as far as how you manage it and stuff. Yes, you now have cloud and on-prem, but the real investment was in usability, and I'm really excited about that. I'm definitely going to be using Office 365 to extend what we do internally to users who are out at venues, which will be much more poorly connected in Sochi, particularly than they were in London. We're going to be looking at doing a lot more video and media management internally, which is greatly improved in SharePoint 2013, and we're going to be really focused on social. Because one of the key values of social, I know Mark talked about social earlier, one of the key values of social is being able to find people. And when you have 4,000 people, most of whom don't know each other and just need to know who is it who knows how to fix this system, that's huge. Also, social is very valuable because when you're on a team and you see one of your colleagues working on a document or finding content, that helps you find things that you may not have even known existed. It helps you discover. And that's very, very valuable in our type of environment, and we will be pushing it hard with SharePoint 2013 because, in my opinion, SharePoint 2013 is now ready for prime time in those spaces. We're also going to be focusing a little bit more on search, although honestly, in a short lifespan like we have, social is more important than search for us. We're going to be moving our medal tracking capability into SharePoint, which is a whole other story we don't have time for. But we have to keep track of all medals, who wins them, when we believe they're won, which is sometimes different than what the organizing committee says for lots of different reasons. And we're going to be absolutely moving that into SharePoint in 2013. We're also in the process of moving applications into SharePoint, particularly within Olympics ongoing. On NBC, we're looking at an employee provisioning system that will allow us to make sure a user gets from the day they're hired to the day they're sitting down at their desk ready to go with all their assets, with all their shares, with all their group memberships. We're going to be using SharePoint as the backbone for that system. So I'm excited about that. What we learned from the Olympics is, first and foremost, you have to understand your users. Listen to what they want because they are telling you. And you might have other goals for SharePoint. You might have sort of ulterior motives that are more important to the business. If you can also deliver some of the things that your users are asking for, adoption becomes a non-issue. I've seen it in action. If you give them what they want, they will adopt it. And if you're changing something that's already in place and they don't want to adopt what you're changing, add something that they do want and push it along that way. Build to your requirements. Don't overbuild. Don't overbrand. I'm a big believer in not overbranding SharePoint, particularly on intranet sorts of scenarios. Yes, your public website, that's a different story. But when a customer comes to me and says, how much effort should we put into branding? Or how do we brand our intranet? How do we brand our team sites? How do we brand our social? I ask them, have you finished branding Outlook and Excel? Is your company logo now in the ribbon of Excel and words, pages are your company colors? SharePoint is an application. Just because it's provided by the web doesn't mean it belongs to the web communications team, like your public website does. And that's a cultural thing that companies have to get through. And one way to get them through it is to say, look, every single version of SharePoint changes. All the work you do now will absolutely be lost when Microsoft updates SharePoint. Why bother? It's an application. Now, there's a line you can walk to where you can get good branding. And we had the right color scheme, and we had our logo. But you know what? That's all. And don't overbrand. Communicate to users. Embed that communication right in front of their face where they need it. Automate as many processes as you can. Don't over-deliver or over-train, because users won't respond to that. If you do all of those things, your staffing requirements can actually be very, very low, particularly automation of procedures. I invested in automating team site creation, because if I didn't, it would have taken me 15 minutes to create every team site. So by automating that process to something that took me 15 seconds to do, it meant I was liberated to tackle other issues as the sole SharePoint guy. And with that, you can win the gold with SharePoint in your organizations. You can get yourself to the 300, 400, 500 level of the maturity model. And if you're interested in the details of what we did, you're more than welcome to email me. You can follow me on Twitter. And the one other URL I'll really point you to is this bit.ly Dan Holme articles, all lowercase. That will take you to my series of articles I do for SharePoint Pro Update every week. And we've done now 5 or 6 articles on different pieces of what I talked about today. They've got screenshots. They've got the details. So if you want to sort of take these back to your team as a technical example, Dan Holme articles, bit.ly/Dan Holme articles will get you there. So thank you, guys. I hope you enjoy the rest of the day. I'm really looking forward to Ed's talk on SharePoint 2013, because I'm looking forward to SharePoint 2013 at the Olympics in Sochi. Thank you guys very much.